Greetings. I'm September Jarrett, Education Program Officer of the Heising-Simons Foundation. I'd like to thank SRI International, our state presenters, and all of you for making time to explore a really important topic together. What states that have established early childhood integrated data systems can do once they have those systems in place to inform policy and program decisions. This webinar series is the second of three that are designed to really help us as California stakeholders be inspired and motivated as we in California move towards developing and using a new early childhood integrated data system. So with that, thank you all for being here, and I'll pass the ball to Missy and the presenters.
Awesome. Thank you, September. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to be able to share what has happened and what other states have been able to develop with their ECIDS. We're going to share a little bit about why you might want to create one and give some examples again to inspire and help to understand that context about what it takes to really create useful analytics so that you can truly use information to inform program and policy decisions. So with that, my name is Missy Coffey. I'm from SRI and will be facilitating today's webinar. I'm thrilled to have a few of my colleagues that have created these examples of really great analytics from their early childhood integrated data systems, which we will call an ECIDS throughout this presentation. We have three state administrators, Howard Morrison from Texas, we've got Bentley Ponder from Georgia, and Steve Matherly from Utah. They're going to share their experiences, and you can tell that there are three great examples here because we've got an education agency, we've got a specific agency focused on early learning, and then we've got a health and human services agency. So it gives you some perspective of the different options while also meeting the needs of the stakeholders. I'm also joined by my colleague, Phil Serendipis, who works with me on a national project called ECDataWorks, and he's going to share what we've learned about developing useful early childhood integrated analytics. So we will begin with a quick definition of an ECIDS for those who may not have been on the first webinar with us. But before we do that, I'd like to just kind of begin with a poll to see who, what your, this provides information for our presenters today about what your familiarity might be with an ECIDS so that they can make sure that they appropriately kind of discuss that. So if you want to take a few seconds to respond to the poll, that would be great. All right, looks like everyone's wrapping up. Let's see if I can share this. So it looks like we have some folks who are familiar. That's great. This is a webinar that's going to be able to share hopefully a little bit more about your using what you know about ECIDS, but can share a little more about the future context of where we're going with the analytics side. I'm glad to see they're somewhat familiar. And those who are not familiar, I will give a quick overview early in this presentation, but encourage you to also check out the first webinar, which will give you a little bit more context to what an ECIDS is. Okay, so with that, let's begin. So again, for those who may not have been able to join us for the first webinar, this is a slide that kind of is able to give a little bit of a definition to what an ECIDS is. In 2014, I worked with states from across the country to define what an ECIDS could do. It's important because although many state agencies were creating this, some of these systems situate within an SLDS, others are external, but it was really important to make sure that we were capturing the information that was needed across early childhood, and then to be able to differentiate that from an SLDS, but to also be able to talk about the connections, as well as be able to talk about the different operational systems that come across all these various programs that are listed from state pre-K programs to Part C programs, childcare programs. And so with that, we were able to find that there are some commonalities across the different states. And many of these states who helped to create the definition are those who are on the call today. So an ECIDS collects, integrates, maintains, and stores. And today we're focusing on the reporting for information from an early childhood program. So you can see here that there's the high level, large kind of publicly funded programs are all the information that these systems are working to integrate. I will say that also they cross multiple agencies. So while we have one state lead on today's call, they work with many partners from other agencies in their state to integrate the data needed from these programs. We all know that there's no early childhood program that specifically meets all of the needs, or there's no agency that's governing all of these programs, even in states like Washington and others in Georgia, for example, that have many of the programs within the specific agency, that there's still multiple agencies needing to work together. And then the other part is that there's multiple levels of data that need to be collected. So there's child data, family data, classroom data, program data, and workforce data. And we look at all of this across and say, what can we answer? What do we not know now that we need to know in order to better serve children and families? And so today we're focusing on the green box at the bottom of this graphic, which is talking about using the information to actually inform program and policy decisions. If you're interested in learning more about kind of how this system gets set up, again, I would encourage you to check out webinar 1. We'll also be learning more about the technology and privacy issues that can be addressed and how other states have approached that in a webinar next month. So given that definition, only 8 states have met the criteria for an ECIDS. A few more are scheduled to go live by the end of 2019. I will note that some of our presenters today have states that are in progress, and I think that's also a really important point of today's webinar, is that not every state needs a fully operational system to start to develop out analytics to show their stakeholders how the system could be used. And so we're going to be able to hear a little bit from the state's examples today about how that could work. So that being said, the goal of any state is not to create an ECIDS for the sake of creating it, but to really be able to pull out and use the information to inform program and policy decisions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Phil, who's going to share a little about the national thinking we've been doing as we develop out analytics.
Great, thank you, Missy. Hello, everyone. My name is Phil Serenides. I do work with Missy on that national project that partners with states to develop and demonstrate analytic tools. I am a research professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and 10 years ago now, I was the director of research for Pennsylvania's Early Childhood Office and spent a lot of time there as we launched Pennsylvania's Early Childhood Integrated Data System. So I've been excited to see the work progress nationally, and I think that we've now been able to really demonstrate in many cases the value of these types of systems and tools. But at the same time, we're learning about some additional support, some additional capacity that's also very important in order for data to be useful and to be used. And so one way to think about that, which is sort of reflected in this quote here, is that we wanna think about both the technical and some of the non-technical capacities that are part of building and using an early childhood integrated data system. And for me, that was a long and hard lesson to learn. I think I'm attracted to data. I'm an analytic person. I think most things, important questions, can be thought about and answered using data. But as I got really further into that, I realized that most of the important and interesting questions about data really come back to people and making sure that we have good systems in place and structures so that people are comfortable and they feel supported and being able to really leverage and use data in whatever they're doing. So this quote again is something that comes from an article we can share with you, Missy and I wrote a little while back, and it's I think a helpful way to start to frame things. Maybe on the next slide would be good, Missy. Right, so the project that we both referred to, Missy and I, is called ECDataWorks, and it's fun to be on this webinar to talk about it, also because all 3 state representatives here were partners with us in this work. Our strategy is to provide various supports. One important one is finances, but also technical assistance, other types of operational support as is needed in order to leverage data that exists or is coming online in order to meet a need or to serve some goal. And so we conceptualize and sort of co-develop some solutions. ECDataWorks is really focused on, at least we try to be focused on, developing real analytic solutions, concrete things that can be built and implemented and used in the field. And so that's part of what we see as a need nationally, and it's also where we have a lot of interest. You could tell we're a passionate group here. Yep, so that's our strategy and our approach. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is helpful for states that are just getting started. I'm really glad to join this call. I think California, as you're thinking about and sort of getting started developing an IDS, I think there's reason for you to be excited. It could seem overwhelming. There is a sort of you might think of a logical order to building a system. Well, first we need to collect data and then we can analyze it and use it. And that's true, but there's also, I think, that doesn't mean there's a chronological order for how you want to address, especially some of these long-term goals for analytics and use. And one of the things that we've really learned, I think, over many states and trials here is that developing analytic tools can really start from the beginning, and probably should, as you think about all of the stages. So conceptualizing your data system, building your data system, bringing together stakeholders, thinking about your data governance. There is a value to even beginning with the end in mind and considering what sort of tools might be intended outcomes. In some cases, that's provided a real nice focal point, sort of an organizing framework to keep people moving and to keep people excited by articulating what sort of tools will be available after the system is available. So that's something that's, I think, been shown, and hopefully Texas, Howard, and I think Stephen can probably speak to the ways in which setting the vision with a tool can be a very good thing. But at the same time, others may have already built their systems and now they're kind of looking back and trying to find ways to maximize the learning opportunities from the data that exists. I think Georgia had already made a lot of progress in their ability to collect, and Bentley will talk about this. Pennsylvania I can speak to as well. Pennsylvania for many years was a leader in data collection, but not necessarily in data use. And I think a way to avoid that is by starting from the beginning with a good team of people to begin to plan out what are the use cases, analytic tools, and opportunities for that. So another thing that I think we've learned, and this will be the last comment I think from me before we hear from states, is I think another thing. Okay, well, we can go here too. Let's see, what's the second bullet? Yeah, so yeah, we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Missy. I apologize. I'm just going to pick up right here on this slide. So we want to make sure, we want to just encourage you to think about beginning with identifying information needs. You may have heard, you may have even said, I know I have, well, let's just collect the data first, and then I can't imagine us not finding a way to use it, right? So that's sort of a dubious proposition. One of the hardest things is to identify information needs. And so this is something that we at ECIDS have found the most success when we really have some facilitated group discussions. And through that dialogue, to come to a shared understanding of information needs, it's very, very useful to sort of be intentional about. Second bullet here is that we probably need to update some of our thinking, at least I do, in terms of what data use even really means. I think we have this sort of, we do a lot of hand waving and say, oh yeah, well there's, of course we know what data use is. I don't think we always do. One way maybe that we can update our thinking is to move beyond simply having an individual making some sort of individual decision based on data, and thinking about information use or data use as a group activity. And so in doing so, that has implications for the tools that you're building. By tools, I mean reports or any sort of analytic solution. But all of the ECDataWorks tools could I think rightly be thought about as being something that groups of people use, none of them something that an individual would pick up and use. And then finally, there are systems, there are reports, but then there need to be organizational strategies too. And this sometimes is done sort of last or not at all, or possibly not even thought about. But what are the organizational solutions that need to go along with the technical and the analytic solutions? That's really the article that Missy and I wrote. where you have those three capacity areas and potentially three gaps. You've got technical, analytic, but also organizational. And then when we start to connect the data with a real learning agenda and with a strategy, then there's an opportunity to get a real catalytic sort of leap forward in evidence use based on systems. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to weigh in and share a little bit about this project, and I'm sure you'll be much more interested to hear from the states and sort of what they're doing.
Thanks, Phil. And as Phil mentioned, often what we will find is that there are plenty of data, but maybe not the use side of it is not really integrated so that it can actually be used to inform decisions. So on the next slide, what we want to do is ask a quick question. Do you agree or disagree? Does California have plenty of data but needs analytic tools to more effectively use the information to inform program and policy? Do you agree with that statement? Do you disagree? And if you'd like to add context, feel free to add your comments into the chat box. Okay, looks like the results are coming in. Okay. All right, so this is interesting. I'm going to share the results. The results are showing that a majority, so 57% of you agree with that comment, but there's still 43% of you that disagree. So that is an interesting kind of divide, and we'd be interested to know a little bit more about why you might disagree. So again, we'd love to hear a little more about that. If you want to add it into the chat box, that would be great. And that could be because you maybe don't think you have enough data, or you has plenty of data. It could be very broad. So it'd be nice to know a little bit more about what you think that could be or how that would work. So thank you for taking that quick poll for us. So with that, I'm going to actually go ahead and move over to the states now. We have a couple integrated questions, and then they're going to show some of the tools that they have created that have been helpful in using their ECIDS to inform decisions. So with that, I'm going to start by having each of the states give a little bit of context to their ECIDS to set the stage. So I think, Bentley, we start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Missy. Yes, hi, this is Bentley Ponder. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at Georgia for Quality Innovations and Partnerships. And that houses our research department and also our partnership unit, and both of those are involved in Cactus. With me, I have Dara Jackson, who's our Cactus coordinator. When we get to our specific slides, I'll introduce her and she'll go into a little bit more detail. Just for context, ours is housed at the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. We are a separate state agency solely dedicated to early education. I've been here 15 years and we've grown quite a bit in that time. And so I think we're now at about 750 staff members. And if anybody has any questions, I can talk about the different federal and state programs under the agency. Our Cactus system, which stands, our EC systems, which we call Cactus, stands for Cross-Agency Child Level Data System, really began with our State Advisory Council grant in terms of planning, but we were able to build it with our Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant. And it includes, different governance strategies. We have different research partners. I would just say that the success of Cactus has really been dependent on all the different partnerships we've had. And I think that, as you'll see in our slides, there's a lot of different partners that we work with in terms of Cactus. And if I was giving any state advice, it would be to continually engaging those partners, because that's what really propels you to the success.
Thanks, Bentley. Howard, you want to go next?
Sure. This is Howard Morrison. I'm the statewide coordinator in the Early Childhood Education Division. Our ECIDS is beginning in the Texas Education Agency. So our agency has received the statewide longitudinal data system grant for many years. Our last cycle had a really strong focus on early childhood and early learning works, which really led us to our next opportunity with EC DataWorks to really kind of visualize and leverage the analytic tool that we're building to make a case for the importance of an early childhood integrated data system. We chose the Texas Workforce Commission to be our partner agency. They're the agency that has child care subsidy programs in Texas. And they also have the Texas Rising Star program, which is their quality rating system. So that's our first step to integrating two agencies' data in one analytic tool to really help expand and enhance and build the case for the importance of the work that we're doing, and really kind of leverage both agencies, and then in future iterations we'll then have the capacity and ability to expand to other state agencies as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Howard. All right, Steve.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Steve Matherly. I work at the State Department of Health here in Utah. I'm the program coordinator for our ECIDS, which we call ECIDS. Our program is also part of the State Advisory Council. Some of you may be familiar with that through Head Start regulation. And as such, we have a large stakeholder group, which includes policymakers from many, and program directors from many agencies and programs, as well as legislators and researchers. And I'm excited to talk to you about some of the data tools we're developing.
Awesome. Thanks all for giving that context. You can see that the states are all in different places, and but it's also that they're all still moving forward with some of these analytic features. So I think that's a good way for a state like California, who's just starting the conversation, to begin and to dive in, is to say, not even a quick win, but just where's the information need and where can we begin that conversation? So with that, so can each of you give a little bit of context to the analytic tool that you are going to be sharing a little bit about today? So we'll start, Steve, with you.
Yeah, sure, you bet. I also should have mentioned that our state was not a Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge state, so we've had to utilize braided funding over the years to develop these data products, such as grants from HRSA, Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems grants, as well as funds from Child Care Development Block Grant, as well as EC DataWorks. Yeah, so we're engaging in constructing two data products to help us with our use cases and data analytics. One we call the Community Assessment Tool, or the CAT, and it's framed in 4 areas: eligibility, access, service, and impact. And I'll be talking about that more here in a little bit later. But both of our data tools are developed to help inform our processes, inform our CIQ, and be able to empower our programs and empower legislators to serve more families and children that need it.
All right, thanks. So we'll go into a little bit more on that in just a minute then. So Bethany, do you want to share a little bit on Georgia's overall tool?
Sure. Thanks, Missy. As I mentioned before, our tool and a lot of our work with ECIDS was focused on increasing our use with partnerships. And one of the things then when we started working with ECIDS, we had the functional capacity with Cactus, but we hadn't really taken that user part to the next level. And so what we wanted to do was to create some tools that can help with that. So as you'll see in a few minutes, we created this interactive tool that is helping with stakeholder engagement. It provides us continual feedback on our Cactus, on our ECIDS systems. And then we're using that to develop new reports, change our different reports, and really just, take that public and stakeholder engagement to the next level. I think another key with our reports is that they're really to help us continually improve our tool. So one of the nice things about something like an ECIDS is that you can continually make changes. And as you see who's using your tool, for us, we found out it was being much more used at the community level than we anticipated. Then that allows you to adapt and to continue evolving.
Great, thanks. And Howard?
Yeah, so our tool is designed primarily for school and decision program makers, really thinking about the administrators, educators, early childhood program staff, really the ones that are kind of making decisions about, different professional development opportunities, different collaboration opportunities, but also community organizations that really support either regional programs or local programs, whether they be public school, pre-K, kindergarten, or also those child care subsidy programs that are in the Texas Rising Star program.
All right, and you can see from all of these, what we wanted to do from the beginning before we dive into each of these tools, give us that, or give some context to why this is really important. Their stakeholders all ask for very different things. And so these ECIDS can be developed in a way that meets multiple needs, but the tools that are going to be focused on today just give you a different kind of take on the different options that may exist and which might be most relevant for California. So with that, Steve, I'm going to pass back to you.
Yes, you bet. Thanks, Missy. Yeah, a little bit more about our Early Childhood Utah Community Assessment Tool, or the CAT. I'm sure many of you on the phone are completely aware and charged with doing needs assessments pertaining to the effect of your program, whether that's a community needs assessment, statewide needs assessment. But I know Head Start and Child Care Development Block Grant, IDA Part C, McVie, Every Student Succeeds Act, TANF, SNAP, etc., community block grants, you're charged with doing a statewide and or community needs. And that's going to drive you to dozens of websites to procure that data and working with your partners. And a lot of data you find out there is when we're talking about early childhood, a lot of data you find is 18 and under or county or statewide, and that's just not really helpful when we're focused on early childhood. So that is one of the reasons why we're developing this community assessment tool, not only to help our program, as I mentioned earlier, our program is charged with making recommendations to the Early Childhood Governors Commission, as well as doing statewide needs assessment on the effectiveness of our early childhood programs. How is our system functioning? One other reason why we developed the CAT is to give context to our ECIDS, our ECIDS. Our ECIDS will tell us how many distinct children we're serving in a particular area, who served that child, one or more agencies, the sequence, the order, and eventually through research, the impact. But our ECIDS might tell us that we served 200 children in a community, whether that's through WIC or home visiting, but how many children are in that community? How many are in poverty? How many are 6 and under? And things of that nature. And so our CAT gives us a lot of context for our ECIDS data. And with all the data we hope to have in the CAT over time, well, we need a way to organize that data so that it's helpful, for our clients, for our stakeholders. And so Phil, who spoke earlier, was able to develop this framework. It should be easy to remember. EASI. Eligibility, how many children, how many families are in an area that could be in need of services and are eligible for services. Okay, now that you know that, how many services are indeed available to those families in that community? What can they access? And this is where our ECIDS comes in. Okay, who accessed those services? What was the frequency, the duration? How many agencies was the family able to receive assistance from? And then eventually our long-term goal is to work with our statewide longitudinal data system and discover the impact on school readiness as well as K through 3 for children that we serve. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. All right. As Missy mentioned earlier, we are a state that both of these data products are under construction, under development right now. So here is a glimpse of our CAT, and on this screen you see that we have a population broke down, for under 6, all the different ages. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of you that are charged with compiling program reports and needs assessment, you have to go to census and you have to go to kids count, and a lot of that data is 18 and under, and it's so broad that it's not particularly helpful. Now, we're uniquely situated here at the Department of Health, that we have access, to vital records and other, critical data. This particular slide not only shows the ages, the population for children under 6, but the mother's risk factors at birth with regards to education. Are we looking at a significant number of, teen pregnancies and pregnancies when the family, the caregivers don't have education, beyond high school, or perhaps not even a high school diploma. And then we can look at children born to women not receiving prenatal care, low birth weight births, preterm births, and then of course a poverty breakdown. This particular slide shows numbers and breaks down for the poverty the various rates that might be related to the eligibility of different programs, whether that's 100% of poverty or 150% and so on. And on this screen we have numbers. On the next screen, next slide, sorry, you see that we have percentages, very similar data. In this, up in the right-hand corner, we did choose a different drop-down, and we're looking at the mom's age, mother's age, and as I mentioned, teenage pregnancies, and then we have the percentages of poverty as well as risk factors at birth. Other components, other chapters of the community assessment tool will show the number of programs, services that are available in an area, as well as some of our ECIDS data. So next slide. So another reason why we're developing the CAT is our ECIDS data is access protected, because it goes down to a zip code level, and we're forever adding additional data elements. And of course, we apply small cell size suppression, but our ECIDS data is access protected by the data sources, and we govern that data to such things as who to give access to approve research products, research projects, and the methodology, and things of that nature. So our ECIDS, we're striving to get at a distinct count of children served. Right now, what we have in the database is our vital records, which was a huge accomplishment, millions of birth and death registry data. We have WIC data in our ECIDS, which is also here at the Department of Health, as well as child care subsidy data, which is indeed at a different agency, a different program. So this is our first sample of some truly integrated data. We can get at a distinct count of children that were served by a single program or multiple programs, and we can use our vital records data as a denominator. So another thing that's imperative for our CAT, data that we have in ECIDS, we can aggregate it up to more of a public level, where it's county-wide or statewide, and perhaps data that we cannot bring into our ECIDS, or not right now, data that might have extra protections, such as mental health data or juvenile justice system or child protective data. We can reach out to our partners, and we can aggregate that data. We can aggregate the ECIDS data to a point where it's considered public data, and we can publish that data on the CAT. So this is a little sample of our ECIDS report and who we're adding over time. Lastly is we have a developmental health program here at the Department of Health, age and stages database, and we'll be adding that data, which actually represents about 170 different early care and education programs. We're going to be adding our home visiting data. That's in the works right now. And then we have 12 Head Start grantees in Utah. I know other states have lots more grantees, but we are going to add our Head Start grantees, as well as our Help Me Grow and our IDEA Part C. That's our first phase for our ECIDS. And I think that's what I have for now.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Steve. And if you have questions for Steve and other presenters as they're walking through, please feel free to put them in the webinar chat or our Q&A boxes, and we will get to them as we get to the Q&A section. All right, Howard.
All right, great. So I'm going to talk about the Expanded School Readiness Framework. Ultimately, a lot of the work that we've done recently really gave us an opportunity to connect with our stakeholders across the state. So regional, local, early childhood specialists, program administrators, early childhood organizations, to really kind of provide input on an analytic tool that would be most useful for program decision makers across the state. So really, they were kind of the driver in what the analytic tool would look like. And we really kind of found some common threads, you know, kind of really going beyond kindergarten readiness, so expanding the focus of school readiness beyond the child to include schools and communities, but also really looking for that functionality within the analytic tool. You know, so when we think about ready communities, you know, we want to really determine whether the communities are ready to meet the needs of the children and families, you know, based on certain data sets. With ready schools, we really want to determine whether the schools are ready to meet the needs of the children and families based on certain data sets. And then with the students, we're really kind of then looking on the student level data, how are they actually prepared for school? And so that's ultimately kind of the framework that we're looking at. But essentially, all that information is providing us greater insight to the work that we're doing and give us a little bit of better idea on that incoming kindergarten cohort. I think next slide. Great. So really with our Ready Community slide here, you'll see that this essentially has early childhood program data that focuses on public pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and Texas Rising Star program level data. So you'll see that there's some number counts there with the number of children served, but also being able to pull up Texas Rising Star provider level information and public school information geographically to be able to identify those programs, the services offered within those programs, and really potentially connect some public pre-kindergartens with child care or Head Start programs for future collaboration options. Next slide, please. In the Ready Schools, we're really here looking at different class size and ratios, staff workforce data, training and professional development data. In that data set, we include our pre-kindergarten guideline trainings. We also include our infant and toddler guidelines and our core competencies for administrators and practitioners. We're also here looking at family engagement information. As I had mentioned before, really kind of looking at that school level framework to ensuring that those schools are ready for those children and families. Next slide, please. And then with the Ready students, here's where we're really capturing some demographic information, but we're also collecting pre-kindergarten and kindergarten assessment data. So we're looking at beginning of year kindergarten data statewide and then by region, but looking at different domains, so emergent literacy, reading and writing, health and wellness, language and communication, and mathematics. But also looking at that from a comparison from the end of year pre-kindergarten as well, and then ultimately looking at those proficiency trends over multiple years. But then also aggregating that proficiency trends by the regional education service centers to really see regionally where there are some trends or gaps or areas of opportunity for future training and professional development.
All right, thanks, Howard. Bentley and Dara.
Okay, thanks, Missy. And it's really nice to hear the progress Stephen and Howard have made with their respective states. I think one of my favorite parts about working with Cactus has been ECDataWorks and being able to work with other states like this. I mean, I think that really helped our whole Cactus system move forward. In terms of our specific tool that we created with ECDataWorks, we sat back and thought, you know, we really needed some data, some evidence of how the tool was being used. So in essence, as someone used to say at ECDataWorks, we built a tool about a tool. And that's what we're sharing here. So the first thing is what we call our leadership dashboard framework. And you can see, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, but this is a way for our stakeholders. And I'll say too, that with a data system that cuts across multiple agencies, you need something to help with that engagement piece. Everybody is really busy. Everybody has a lot of different projects on their plate. And, you know, it's sometimes hard to get together to have regular meetings. So we needed something that could be used by the different agencies that are all contributing data to our ECIDS system. So here we have, you know, our data usage, And then we have a place to look at data needs where people can respond to what sort of data needs they have. And then we also have a place where we can keep track of our research agenda. I will say that we're still learning a bit about how to use this tool. So I think that even though it's been developed, I think that the usage is still something that is evolving. Next slide, please. So before we get into the actual leadership tool, I think it's important to talk about some of the things that all of our stakeholders can use with Cactus. And so one of the things that we have here is what we call our policy map. And this is publicly available. It's not just available to the Cactus leadership, it's available to everyone. And this was done in conjunction with our Georgia Family Connection Partnership, who oversees our Get Georgia Reading campaign, which is the goal of all children being able to read on grade level by 3rd grade. So we were able to take something that was already ongoing, take our Cactus system and embed it within that. And so the policy map, it's simply a mapping and reporting tool for us to be able to use all of our different data and then provide our local stakeholders opportunities to look at that data at the local level. Next slide, please. And so here's an example of using the policy map. And I'm going to turn it over to Dara, who's going to give you just a quick overview of what you see here.
Health and economic as well as education data.
Bentley, I don't know if we can hear Dara.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you might want to get a little bit closer, Dara, to the microphone.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, perfect. So here's kind of a visual depiction of the policy map. So what it does essentially is you're able to layer over health, education, as well as economic indicators that come from census data. And you're able to essentially layer that over the Cactus enrollment. So this specific tool has really been helpful for us in really helping to empower our community stakeholders into knowing what the community conditions for their specific county looks like. And so these specific policy updates, data updates, will be available within the next couple of weeks, actually. And just a little bit of background, we are currently providing trainings on these different visualization tools. And so this specific map looks at the poverty levels within different communities, as well as it layers over Head Start and Early Head Start program locations, just to kind of map where those specific needs are and if the programs are positioned in the best locations where the needs are. Next slide, please.
And right here, this is just an overview of our which is also part of our work with our digital reading campaign. And this just shows some of our different programs and those programs. And if you go to the next slide, you get more detail of that.
Bentley, we can't hear you or Dara.
Oh, sorry. We're moving my computer around.
Okay.
So can you just go to the next slide? We'll just go there.
The Tableau dashboard or the next slide?
The next slide. Can you hear? I'm sorry. I think we're, yeah, there we go. Dara.
Yeah. Are you able to hear us? Hello? Can you hear us?
Okay, Dara, can you try speaking?
Yeah. Can you hear us now?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So here's just a screenshot of the Tableau dashboard that we've worked with Georgia Family Connection Partnership to develop. And this is essentially just another way to visualize those Cactus reports that we have that look specifically at enrollment on these programs on the right of the screen. And so what we've really seen was community stakeholders are really able to use these different dashboards to kind of filter out the information relevant to them, as well as share that across their community with other stakeholders.
Right, and you can see there too, if you're looking at the different data sources that we have in our Cactus system on the side there, those are the different programs that are available in Cactus. All right, next slide, Missy. So this gets into our actual leadership dashboard here. And so this was something we wanted to show so that all the different leaders that contribute data to Cactus can at any given time log on and see. So there you'll see the utilization. So here we can see the number of visitors within a certain time period. And then what is interesting for us is where are our visitors coming from? As would be expected, the largest number of users are from Georgia, but you can also see that other states are logging in to see what we're doing with our tools. We're working on a way for this to be done, and so counties can look, so different communities can be able to look at this from the community level. All right, next slide. So this is a way that people can come in and do a report, and this is just a way that we can log those reports, those requests. Some are questions, some are, actually supports in using the system. They're assigned to a specific person, and then we can see when those are closed out. And again, this is all part of our leadership dashboard. All right, next slide. This is from the leadership dashboard. So this is a way that someone can log in and also ask Cactus a certain question for that. And, so this is a way that people can look at, hey, I need either a different data source or more data, or I need more assistance with Cactus. All right, next slide. And this is for a specific data request. So one of the things that I think that we've struggled with our ECIDS is how do we make sure that our policies link up to our technology. We have the technology there, but we're still working on the different policies. And so this was one of the ways we can make sure that we're giving people access to provide feedback. So how can are you looking for different Cactus reports? Do you want us to customize a Cactus report for you, or are you looking for a specific data set? This is a unified way that people can go in and be able to do that. All right, next slide. And this is just an example of what the data request looks like. It's a screenshot from that specific page. And next slide. Oh, and that's it. Okay.
Thanks, Bentley and Dara. I think what's really great about all the different examples provided here is that you can see that there's a process focus, as in the example that Bentley just shared, that there are resources that need to be built into an ECIDS to give user access, and more than just Google Analytics, but real information about how the system can support better information, and that's leading more towards the research agenda. Then we also have examples of content areas, both in terms of the community assessment and the enhanced school readiness reporting. So what I'd like to do is have each of the states give their advice on what you have learned through this process, but when you're also doing that, if you can give an example of the types of actions taken from your analytic tools. I know that these are still new, but if you can say these are the things that you would hope to, what decisions you're hoping will be informed by this, I think that would help our audience today. And I think, Howard, we'll start with you.
Okay, so when we look at the advice to others using the data effectively, early on in our, meeting was really to engage, key stakeholders from across the state, but also make sure that they had kind of a general understanding of the data collection that our state agency had at TEA for public pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, but also what the Workforce Commission had for their Texas Rising Star program level data. Ultimately, throughout that process, kind of keep reiterating, kind of recapping kind of the vision, intent, and scope of the project. Although we had very high-level goals, we had to kind of stay within the constructs of the project plan. But also just kind of maintaining that communication with them, really kind of providing, consistent updates, really kind of leveraging the importance of the role that they play in the work that they're doing, would really kind of be my kind of advice or kind of key takeaways from some of the work that we've done. And sorry, Missy, what was the first question that you wanted us to answer?
What are some of the examples of the types of decisions you're hoping to inform using, in your case, the Texas Readiness Report?
Sure. So our analytic tool is really geared towards, so maybe an example would be an early childhood district administrator, also a child care director at a Texas Rising Star program, a regional early childhood education specialist. We have 20 regional education service centers across the state that support their programs within their region. And on the counterpart to that, there's local workforce development boards that support the Texas Rising Star program. So really those early childhood specialists at the regional and local level to really be able to take action. So an example for an ESC, they may use the analytic tool to visualize some of the school readiness needs in their region to create professional development and partnership opportunities. For a school district, they may leverage PD resources across the region. They may identify specific professional development needs or identify partnerships. So we're really promoting public-private partnerships. And this would be a way to visualize in that community level where they can say, okay, our school district has X amount of Texas Rising Star 2, 3, and star level providers within a certain region. There may be some partnership opportunities to kind of leverage and expand our capacity for serving more students, but also collaborate on professional development and technical assistance.
Awesome. Thanks, Howard. Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, I'll start with your kind of last question first, uses that we've already had from our data tools. So even though they're not fully complete or fully, published, I have a lot of the data here in my workstation and such. And so for our community assessment tool for the CAT, I've already been receiving calls from our Head Start for data to help them with their community needs assessment, as well as Utah, just for the first time we received the preschool development, grant, which, formally raised the top early learning challenge. I know PDG grants is new, but we have it. And our first year, as many of you probably know, is all about a statewide needs assessment. And so those that are doing the preschool block grant, the preschool development grant, have reached out to me and asked us for some of our under 6 poverty data, under 6 population data, and broken down by the specific rates and population, that we have for both of those data sets. So that's been fun. I'm really excited to get that published and put out on our public Tableau server and for all of our stakeholders to utilize. And as far as our ECIDS practical recent use, it's more, I predict Utah, as I mentioned, just during our last legislative session, created the governor's early childhood cabinet or commission, and the EDO from the various big agencies here in Utah will be meeting with the lieutenant governor to talk about early care and education in our early childhood system here in Utah. And I guarantee some of the first questions that come up: how many children is the Department of Health serving? How many children is the Department of Workforce Services serving? What about the State Education Agency? The next question is, well, how many are y'all serving? Cross-agency. Can you give me a distinct count of children that all of the agencies are serving? And then, of course, what's the impact? So these needs are just around, and use cases are just around the corner. Lessons learned. Oh, you got to have high-level leadership. You've got to have high-level support. You've got to work frequently and deeply with your privacy, security, and your legal. You got to have frequent conversations and updates and input from your stakeholder group. And then you have to be perfectly clear about what your data system or data products, what they can do and what they can't do. Are they operational in nature, or are they research in nature, or are they both? And where does it live, and who owns it, and how's the data use going to be governed, et cetera, et cetera. I'll pass that on to Georgia.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. I would just kind of echo what my colleagues have just said. I would say for us, one of the things that we're really using our tool for is that development of the research agenda. We didn't have a screenshot with that, but I mean, one of the things we've got to do with our Cactus system is make it more accessible. And part of that will be using that to do research and making that data and, and developing a research agenda. I would say in terms of lessons learned, to me, the big one is you've got to make sure you have dedicated staff to the project. And when I say that, you've got to have people that the primary focus of their job is working on the ECIDS, or that's what makes it most successful. Having people that it's just 5% of their time or 10% of their time, you need some of that, but it's also that makes it hard to move it forward. And I think when you're always talking about data, you need to think about why are you using the data? You need to ask the question, not can you do this, but should you do this? And always think of the unintended consequences.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that and for being here today. We just want to, now that you know a little bit about each of these tools, and there's more to learn, but I want to see if you all answer this question, which is, which of the early childhood analytic tools that we shared today would you most find valuable for California? All right, a couple more responses are coming in. Anybody else want to respond? All right, we got a couple of responses here. So it looks like we have a couple of responses for the CAT, a couple for the expanded, and one for the leadership. And I think that's probably about right, given where California is and just exploring this process. And so that's exciting to see that there could be an option for many of these tools. So thank you for sharing for our panelists today. I think that's really helpful information. So as we wrap up, we have some questions. I think I embedded some of the questions I had seen coming into the last slide. So thank you, presenters, for doing that. Feel free to reach out to the presenters with additional questions. Their contact information will be later in the slide. One of the other questions we have received is about where you can access Webinar 1. So before we wrap up here, I will put that in the chat box for anyone who is interested in the recording for Webinar 1. I will also put the registration link in for the next webinar happening on October 18th for you if you're interested in registering for that event as well. There are a couple resources. If you want more information about what an ECIDS is, we have a flyer that's linked in the presentation that you can access. Phil mentioned a publication we did called Leveraging Early Childhood Data for Better Decision Making, so there's a link to that. And then newly released are the frameworks and call to actions for each of the tools that were presented today. So all of those resources will be available with the webinar presentation. The contact information is available here, and I would like to thank our presenters for joining us today and for sharing their time and their experience. I think it's really helpful. I'd also like to thank Heising Simons for hosting the event. We will be posting these materials, and so if you would like to share this with others, please just reach out to us and we'll make sure that you have access to that. But thank you for your time today, and we hope that we'll be able to join you, or you will join us for Webinar 3 on October 18th. So thank you all for your time.